Welcome to episode 7 of this GS750 restoration. Hope you're enjoying the series. In this episode, even though the engine is running, I'd really like it to be running a bit better and possibly even take the bike for a test ride before I take the engine out so that I know I'm in reasonable shape. So yeah, there's a few things that need to be done to try and get it to run a bit better and idle, that sort of thing. So yeah, let's see how we improve the performance of the engine and try and get it running a bit better than it is now. Now, my original plan was that once the engine was running, I'd remove the engine and then start pulling the frame to pieces and send things off to be powder coated, etc. But while the engine is running, it's not running particularly well. Float levels are all over the place, although the carburetors have stopped overflowing, which is good. So I've made the decision to pull the carburetors off and give them a full service, so take them completely to pieces. I've ordered all the new O-rings, and we'll obviously reset the float levels to the correct level. They're all a bit low at the moment, so that's the plan, is to try and get this actually running a bit better. While it does start and run, it won't run without the choke on. It doesn't really rev out, so obviously a few more issues within the carburetors. So that's what I plan to do next, is take the carburetors off and give them a full service and probably give them a bit of a polish while they're out as well. So carburetors are now off, disassembled from the backing plate, and we'll slowly start pulling these apart, checking the adjustments, giving them a clean, make sure everything's clean inside, and wait for the O-rings to come in, check sizes and things like that, and hopefully get them back on working correctly. And oh yes, of course, adjusting the float levels to correct levels as well. So a parcel arrived from Partzilla yesterday, including 4 of the cam cap bolts to replace that one that snapped, plus a few spares, and then an assortment of different shim sizes that I've calculated to adjust the valve clearances, so that's another job that needs to be done as well. So I've been taking these carburetors apart and first of all cleaning them, soda blasting them to clean them, and then putting them back together. Here's some that have been soda blasted and then ultrasonic cleaned. A couple of the bodies there for carbies 1 and 2. There's the main frame that they all bolt to, so looking okay. Rather than buy a sandblasting cabinet, I actually made my own. So this is just an 80 litre tub from the local hardware store with some plumbing fittings and some industrial gloves in there. I've got my sandblaster in there, and then I've connected up my vacuum cleaner to it to at least suck out some of the powder. Once you start blowing, it just fills up full of powder. But anyway, does the job okay. So, yeah, just waiting on the rubber O-ring kit to arrive, then I can start putting the carburetors back together. So I replaced this broken bolt on the cam cap here with one from Partzilla, supposedly a high tensile bolt, and set all the valve clearances with new shims. So there was a few miscalculations on the shims, so I had to get an extra couple of 2.7s and a few extra spares. Probably a good idea to get a few spares if you're doing the same thing. So they may change over time, so I can now put the rocker cover back on permanently. So I've been doing a bit of research online about these Mikuni VM26 SS carburetors that were fitted to the GS750 in those days, just trying to find out how they work, how to tune them, any tips. So there's two ways to adjust the mixture. There's the pilot air mixture here, this one there, and then there's the pilot fuel mixture up the front underneath there. So both of those have been played with by the previous owner, so I'm trying to find a sort of a starting point to get a reasonable mixture for that low end. Apparently 7/8 of a turn out on the pilot fuel and 1.5 turns on the pilot air is a reasonable starting point, so that's what I've set them to. Another thing I did was get new drain plugs, as there was one of them that actually had a split in it somehow, so previous owner had obviously over tightened it and managed to split it, so I just kept dripping fuel. So I managed to get 4 of those and new O-rings for these carburetors, and also got an O-ring set for the whole carburetors, and replaced as much of that as I could, just to try and get this engine running a little bit better, and hopefully take it for a few test rides before we start pulling the engine out. So viewers with an eagle eye might have noticed in a previous section that I actually had the rocker cover gasket round the wrong way. Obviously I discovered my error before I put the rocker cover on, so that's all fixed. So in an effort to make the engine run a bit better, I've done a few things. With some spare parts, I've actually replaced the exhaust seals where the exhaust bolts on to stop those leaks, just to hopefully make that help it run a little better. One of the other things is to I've changed the O-rings in these little manifolds, these rubber manifolds that connect the carburetors to the engine. There's an O-ring inside there which once I pulled them out were actually rock hard, so I suspect it was probably sucking some air in there. And then also the manifolds, the rubber manifolds that connect the carburetors to the airbox were quite hard and very hard to get on, so I purchased 4 new manifolds for that as well, to make that an easier job to get the air filter on. I have also checked the ignition timing, so sometime in the past some previous owner has changed the ignition from the old point system to electronic ignition, which helps. So the timing was slightly out, but pretty close. I just fixed that up as well. So every little bit helps to making this run a bit better. So since I had the air filter on for testing the engine, I thought I'd just slap some of the other bits and pieces on, the tailpiece and the side cover, just to start to get a bit of an idea of what this is going to look like in the end. So yeah, I think it's going to look pretty cool. Obviously that chain guard needs to change, the seat needs to be recovered, but starting to get an idea of what the final product is going to look like. So I've been playing around with the mixture on these Mikuni carburetors. As I said a bit earlier, somebody suggested that 7/8 of a turnout on the pilot fuel was a good starting point, and 1.5 turns on the pilot air. So I started off with that. It seemed to help with the other changes I've made, certainly help at start. After doing a bit of checking of the plugs, it seemed that was a little bit lean. So I've been slowly adjusting out the pilot fuel to first 1 turn and then 1 1/4 and now 1 1/2, which I think maybe 1 1/2 is a little bit rich. 1 1/4 seems to be about right. So I have actually been going for a bit of a test ride on it. So I basically fixed up, put some blinkers on there. Some of these are aftermarket and some of these are just ones repaired from the ones that I received with the bike. Put some aftermarket mirrors on there. New blinkers at the back, because the ones that were on the original tray thing at the back were completely different, so they're new. I've borrowed the number plate off one of my other bikes. So fairly loud with this 4-into-1 on it, which isn't great, but at least it sort of gets me somewhere. So it's running okay, but it's still not giving me the sort of power that I would expect. Certainly running a lot better with the mixture, which seems to be getting pretty close. Also put some new fuel in there. But yeah, I mean, the brakes are terrible. The discs are not too bad. I mean, they're actually fairly flat, but quite glazed. And obviously the pads could be, I mean, they could be 30 or 40 years old, who knows. So I looked into getting those discs ground, and that was quite expensive. That was like $160 per disc, plus shipping to send it to somewhere to get it done. So considering that the actual surface is pretty flat, it just needs it's just a bit glazed. I think I've decided I'm just going to rough the discs up myself once I pull it apart, and I have purchased new pads for the front and the rear. So the rear disc is a little bit more scoured, but I think it'll do for now. You know, if it becomes an issue, I'll look at something a bit better later. But yeah, the brakes are pretty average at the moment. So the poor performance, I've rechecked all the compression, and the compression's quite low, very even across all 4 cylinders, but it's about 75 pounds on each cylinder, which is way below what it should be. Pretty sure that the valves are fine, so come to the conclusion that I probably should have changed the rings when I pull the engine apart. So I've put a bit of oil into one of the cylinders and then tested compression again, and it went up to over 100 pounds, so it looks like the rings aren't great. So I have purchased a new set of rings and a new head gasket. So the plan at the moment is that I will start pulling it apart. I have an engine stand that I'm going to make up a bracket for, that I can mount the engine on to help me change the rings and tidy it up. So basically, yeah, the next step is to start pulling it to pieces and getting the frame blasted and powder coated, and slowly sort of restoring it while working on the engine as well. So yeah, coming along, I made the mistake of not changing the rings, thinking that they would be okay, but obviously they've been moved around, and so they're obviously leaking a bit. But it is running, it runs okay. As I say, the exhaust is very loud, so looking at getting a 4-into-2 system for this, or like the original, but that's proving to be difficult to find. But anyway, we'll keep searching. So I have had the engine started today, but I just thought I'd give you a bit of a listen and see what it, how it starts, and how it's working now that we've got a bit of tuning, etc. done. A little bit of choke on standard on there on the fuel. The tank is reasonably full. So as you can see, it starts up quite easily. Seems to idle okay, considering that the compression is down. It seems to be running not too bad. No smoke, which is good news. So hopefully while it's all apart, we can change the rings and get the engine running even better, and start doing the full restoration on this. So that's it for episode 7 of the GS750 restoration. I hope you're enjoying the series. The next step is to start pulling it apart and right down to the frame, and work on the frame, and start slowly putting it back together. It's been a bit of a delay. I've been interrupted by trips down to Phillip Island and motorcycle rides and work, etc. But Christmas is coming up, so hopefully I'll have a bit of time to work on it then. But so So yeah, that's it for episode 7. See you in episode 8.